Hey, Tom Bentey Media Podcast. I wanted to talk a little bit about this upcoming cast with RomanMolinoDunn of Mirrortone Studios. Roman is a very talented composer for film and television and also for commercials as well. I've had the pleasure of working with Roman for the last 5 or so years on various projects in various capacities. He's scored a lot of my projects. He's provided sound mixing services, sound design. And you don't really think about music when you go to the movies or you watch a film, and you don't think about sound mixing and sound design, but they're so important in any film production. And filmmakers know exactly what I'm talking about, but a lot of just the general audience members do not. And Roman's just such a phenomenal talent in that respect, and his creative insight and his musical abilities have enhanced my projects tremendously. And as an entrepreneur, as a filmmaker, as an actor, as somebody who's looking to grow and progress in all aspects of my professional life and also my personal life, but I try to learn from the individuals that I've worked with. And I was always so impressed with Roman's work ethic, his creative approach, and the way that he interacts with clients. And I try to bring that mindset to the clients that I work with. While Roman has amazing ideas and provides really tremendous talent to all my projects, I never feel like he's taking them over. He's taking creative control. And I felt that with individuals in the past. He's just so easy and mellow to work with, but at the same time, he really provides really great creative services, which I think is huge. And a lot of times people become so engulfed in making their mark on a particular production that they really shouldn't have the rights to the vision on, but they do so anyway. And Roman, what I think makes Roman so successful at what he does is that he's grounded, he's very hardworking, he knows exactly his place in the production and his place in his career and where he wants to go in his career. And he never gets involved in the nonsense that really can come with working in the creative industry. He's just stays laser focused, and he focuses on his work and the creative aspects that he brings to the different productions that he's working on. So I really enjoy talking with him. I hope to continue to work with Roman for as long as we are able, because he's such a great talent, such a great guy, which he talks about in terms of how he networks, is just really having personal relationships with his clients and understanding their needs and working to the best of his ability to really fit those needs. So if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it. We got some great guests coming up. Tell your friends about it, and let's go on this journey together. So I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome everybody. Tom Bentey Media, episode number 3. One of my good friends, colleagues, someone who I've worked with a lot, RomanMolinoDunn of Mirrortone Studios. Roman is a sound mixer and a music composer for film and television and commercials. Had really great experiences working with him. He's composed a lot of my films. Just a really great guy. Happy to have him, and look forward to a great discussion. So, Roman, thanks again for joining this podcast, and tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you got into music.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Tom. I really appreciate it. And, the kind words, it's always been a pleasure working with you too. So, I mean, my background is, I went to school for classical music composition. And I guess when I was studying, I went to school in New York City, and I was trying to find my way. So I would do anything I could in music just to be a music. I didn't really know it would translate into film or mixed, multimedia at some point. So I started working as what's called a music transcriber, which means that I would listen to music and write out sheet music. It's like a thing you would do for composers or bands that provide them with sheet music so other musicians can play. And then that kind of turned into working with these composers and artists, writing out orchestrations, because they'd have the sheet music and they'd be like, okay, write it for, a string quartet, right? So all of a sudden I found myself doing more arranging work. And then I found myself producing for these people, meaning I bring them into the recording studio and help them record. And then it turned out that I kind of needed to, to maximize my income, I needed to get my own place instead of going as a freelance music producer and arranger to other studios. So I found a business partner, Jay Rothman, who's how I know you, Tom. And we got together and we started Miratone Studios, and then Miratone Studios turned into this like full audio post-production and music recording studio. So we'd get people coming in to do commercials. So they'd either do voiceovers or they'd be looking for music. And then one thing led to another. I was writing music for these commercials, and then sometimes the commercial directors or production companies would also do film or television. And then if I was lucky enough, I might get a call, and then that might lead to another project. And yeah, that's kind of the trajectory I took. And here I am doing a lot more of the film and television stuff than I am anything else at the moment.
Now, growing up, were you always just fascinated by music? Was it a big part of your life? And who were your influences?
Oh yeah. So I started really young, like 3 or 4. We started with the piano lessons just because my parents were real big proponents of music education. And I had an older brother who played the piano, so it was always around. And we had when I say we, my brother and I had like a real strict classical training, meaning, lessons very early and multiple instruments and all that. And it was funny because I kind of rejected popular music like rock and pop and all of that, popular for lack of a better word, just non-classical, again, for lack of a better word, music. And then so it was kind of funny that my career led me back to those popular musics through the recording studio. And then the recording studio, like I was saying, led me to more classical and film-oriented scores. But yeah, we started really young, and I'd say my influences were probably Baroque and Renaissance music, even though that's
What's Baroque?
Like Bach.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like very classical European music.
Yeah, and Baroque is more of in music, it's more of a time period, but it also comes with a whole vocabulary. But just think Bach or Vivaldi, that kind of composer. And so you could tell that's not really asked for a whole lot when I'm writing a film score. But that's kind of what started my music education as a composer.
So you weren't rocking out to Nirvana in the 90s or Green Day or Offspring and all that stuff?
I mean, I was aware. Yeah, no, I was, so I did reject the pop music, but then I would always find my way back. I mean, I was a big emo kid in high school, and, that came, basically, I studied classical as a young kid, then I hated it because your parents are forcing you to do it. So then you get really into rock music, right? And I get playing in bands and all that. And then when I went to university, I started rejecting that and be like, no, I want to be a serious academic composer. But then once I hit the workforce, I realized these are all valid types of music. I mean, it's music. Music's awesome. It doesn't matter what the genre is. It matters what your client, or, in this case, a filmmaker or artist, is asking you to make. And then you look inside yourself to find your experience with that genre of music and how you can translate that into something that they're looking for.
Now, did you know going into college that essentially what you're doing now in terms of scoring for film, television, and commercials, was that what you ultimately wanted to do, or did you have other ideas?
It's twofold. My main idea was to actually be a classical composer. And when I say classical, I guess I mean concert hall. So I wasn't even really aware at that time that you could make a living doing this. I mean, I always loved film scores, but I guess it just hadn't registered that I could be doing that. I figured, I studied all the classical composers, like I was saying. So like, I wanted to be Bach, I wanted to be Vivaldi, I wanted to be people who could write music for other people to play. So I wasn't aware of that, but the other part of that answer is I wanted to do anything I could to make money in music. And like I said, that took me through transcribing and doing all kinds of other weird musical jobs that would take a while to describe what I was doing, but just small niches just to like keep my hand in the game, so to speak. So no, I didn't really know that this is what would end up happening, but I had a pretty definite end goal, which would be writing music for a patron, if you will.
Gotcha. And let's break down your creative process. How do you approach it? What's it like working with the filmmakers or the corporate entities that you're producing this music for? How does it break down?
Well, so it's always kind of the same, in the sense that, and when I say the same, I mean between a commercial or a television show or a film, or even I do a lot of work with recording artists, and it's always the same end goal, which is well, and starting point too, which is what does the client want? So the creative process is really more to understand what they're trying to articulate, because sometimes people have a different musical background than the last person you worked with, and maybe their vocabulary is different than mine. I mean, it most definitely generally is different than mine, but I try to touch on either one of two things, which is their emotional end goal, and really try to hammer in, uh, what they want as opposed to what I want, because it's not for me. The music is for their production. Like these are people who've been living with this idea for so much longer than the couple of weeks that I spent working on it. So I need to understand what they want. And I guess to answer you in a much more definite, pragmatic sense, the first thing is to get spotting notes, where they want the music, what kind of music, and what the function is of the music during a given moment. Like if it's supporting the action, or if it's in contrast to it, if it's psychological, or if it's physical. And then I generally start writing the music and get some ideas. Sometimes I've had a good working relationship with somebody and I know that they'll like certain things. Other times I'll just throw something down and start to get reactions to clarify if I understand what their vocabulary actually meant. And then it's just a series of back and forth, like any collaboration. I send them something that I love, but that I'm not too sensitive if they want to change. And then I get the notes and I give it another go until everybody's all happy.
Yeah, that's a similar process to how I work with video production clients, both narratively and also from a corporate standpoint. And it sounds like it's a very similar kind of mechanism that you're working with as well. And I don't know if you've run into this, but I've run into it where particularly corporate clients, they want to make sure that you've done something almost exactly like they're looking to do, or in the same industry that they are. And I always try to tell them, listen, it's the process is the same, no matter if you're a small restaurant or you're a pharmaceutical company. The process that I'm working with and how I go about it is very similar. It's about listening to the client's needs, understanding what the purpose is, and then translating that, getting feedback, and reworking and reworking until everyone's happy.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing for sure. I'd say the main difference is somebody like yourself, you're doing it with so many moving parts. I'm just brought in at the very end. So I guess I don't envy you in that sense, where you have even more direct pressure from the client, so to speak, than I would have. Um, but yeah, it's very much the same. We're just providing a service and trying to figure out the best way to make the people who purchase that service happy.
Gotcha. And I've been following you on social media. You got a lot of great things going on right now. A lot of big films. Can you tell us a little bit about those films, how you got involved, and kind of, I guess, your artistic expertise with what went into the musical choices for those films?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the one I'm still really proud of, well, I'm proud of them all, but the one I'm still actively pushing a lot harder than the others is a film called Huracán on HBO Max. And it came out in September, so it's not, it didn't just come out like this week or anything, but it's been a really great ride. It got a really great reception. And that film, I loved working on that because I got to do not only the music, but I also got to mix the music, and I was brought on at a very early stage in that. So that process actually was a little bit different than what we were talking about, in the sense where I got to discover the meaning of the music along with the director in a lot more in a much earlier stage than I often do. I mean, I got the scripts. That's how early I was involved in this project, and that doesn't always happen. And I got involved in that. You said social media, and that's how you're following what I'm doing. I mean, I met this director on social media. His name's Cassius Corrigan, and he liked my work on social. I liked his work. And then when he came out with this feature, he asked me if I'd wanted to be involved, and started composing right away, just some ideas that resonated from what I read in the script. And we spent, I mean, that film might have taken 2 years, something like that. It was a long process. And, you know, that's not unusual for a film from start to finish, 2 years, but it's unusual that the composer is working for 2 years on it. But it was a super cool process because he didn't put any temp music in it. He said, what do you hear? And I showed him, and then he said, that's cool. I like this part of it. I don't like this. And then we just developed this language that was really cool. So that was the big one. And then right after that, during quarantine, this is all during quarantine, which is kind of crazy. I started doing a YouTube original show called Kid Correspondent. And it was like the polar opposite, because Huracán was a psychological thriller that's a bit violent. It's about an MMA fighter. And there's a bunch of famous MMA fighters in the film and stuff. It's a cool film. So you guys check, if everybody has HBO, check out Aurakhan or Huracán in English. And then Kid Correspondent it's like a kids TV show where they're news anchors. And you can watch that because it's a YouTube original. So you can find that streaming, but the music's super light and fun. And I made it using a bunch of kids instruments, you know, like those old speak and spells where you could like type in words, or like toy pianos. So it was totally an opposite process. But yeah, I mean, I could keep going on, Tom, about all the different projects, but those were the biggest two at the moment.
That's great. That's really cool. Yeah, I definitely want to check out Aurakhan. And you said it's a psychological thriller about MMA fighters. I guess the music is more dark and from a tonal standpoint.
Yeah, totally. So, and I'll just plug it, but the soundtrack's coming out in like 2 weeks. So keep an eye out for that if you guys want to hear the music aside from the film, but definitely watch it in the film because it is a pretty present score at times. So you'll be able to experience the music without just buying the soundtrack. But yeah, the texture is what we call an orchestral hybrid. So there's full orchestra in there, but then there's a whole bunch of synthesizers and like weird electronic versions of instruments, because the actual psychological issue is this person has essentially a dissociative identity disorder, which means that they have multiple parts of their identity and they're battling with it. So the music has that same issue where it's between organic orchestral instruments and these hybrid synthesizers, and they're kind of at war with one another. And the hard part about film scoring, if I may say, is that you have two objectives. One's to move the narrative along, and then the other is to insert your subtext. So I was trying to do this psychological warfare thing with the score itself, but then you also have to, of course, hit the timing points and change with the scenes. And so the score to it is a lot darker. It's not easy listening by any means, but there's moments of hip hop for the fights and some action sequences. But yeah, it was a cool exercise in finding a new sound.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine also the challenge with scoring a film is it's so important to the overall narrative, but you don't want to overdo it. Like, because when it's overdone, it really hinders the creative process. So I would imagine there has to be that balance on your end to make sure that it's compelling the narrative forward, but it's not overtaking that narrative.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I really lean on the director for this stuff. Because like I said, at the end of the day, it's not my film, and I'm just submitting the best ideas I've come up with. But it's not very unusual for me to realize halfway through the scoring that the music should be way softer, or maybe there should be no music in this scene. And it's no reflection on what I've done. It's just a matter of what's best for the story there. You know, it just depends on the film. And again, you know, I just really rely on the director to help me with that stuff. And I almost kind of say sometimes that the director is the one who wrote the music. I'm just the one who helped produce the soundtrack.
Great. That's a really good attitude to have. It sounds like you understand you're part of this whole process of creating a film. And it's not just because some people that are in scoring, I would imagine that sometimes they can kind of get a little overbearing. And I think it's important to just make sure that you always keep the narrative at the forefront and make sure that the director's vision is being focused on, as opposed to all these different moving parts, because everybody has an ego and sometimes they can get a little out of control. But with you, it's always very great from a creative standpoint. Like, you understand that you're here to propel this narrative and not overtake it, which I think is always great. And that's why I work with you time and time again.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, I always think if I wanted to write music, I probably shouldn't be working on movies. But if I want to work on movies, I should write music.
Yeah, in terms of two films that really stand out to me, and when I think about the sound mixing and the sound direction and also the score, are Mad Max Fury Road. I don't know if that was
Sure.
just
from
a musical standpoint, from a sound design standpoint, I was just blown away by it. And also the Social Network with Trent Reznor. And it just, it was so compelling. The music was just really mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I think of those two, I think I'd favor Mad Max over of the two, but they're both, fairly highly regarded scores. But I love Junkie XL's stuff in general, and both of those scores you mentioned. What I love about them is both of those composers came from the pop music world, and made their way into film scoring, and they both did it in a way like you're talking about, where they're still having to not have the ego of this is my music, and they're part of the filmmaking team. So if you listen to interviews with those composers too, they'll talk about that, how you have to hang up your artist hat at some point and put on your collaborator hat. But also I got my wheels turning when you start talking about specific movies. In Mad Max, the sound design was so good too. And I don't know what that working relationship was like between Tom Holkenborg and the sound design team, but they fit together like a glove in that film.
Yeah, it was remarkable for sure. Yeah. So now, do you have your own band that you're working on? Are you creating albums independently?
No. So I have a pseudonym called Electro Point, and that's a name I use as a music producer. So I'm not an artist, but I've produced a lot of songs for reality TV stars. And what happened was, when I started doing that, I wanted to differentiate my given name, which I use for film music, because I do songs for like Howard Stern Show and Drag Race and Love and Hip Hop and all of these television shows, which the music is very different than a film score. Sometimes it's lewd, sometimes it's a parody. And so I wanted to differentiate those two personas. But what ended up happening, Tom, was people kind of gravitated towards the fact that I was successful with some of that music as like validation that I might do well in their film. So it turned out I was trying to hide this whole part of my musical career from people that were appreciating it. So now I kind of just go by either my given name or by Electro Point. But when I'm producing songs for artists, I still just use Electro Point. But I'm not the artist in that. I'm just a producer or a songwriter, or sometimes people put my name on their song because, like I said, I've had some Billboard charting songs or hits on the radio and people want to just use my name on it. But those two worlds are kind of colliding these days.
Is that creative process similar when you're producing songs as to when you're doing a film score?
Yeah, sometimes. I would say 90% of the time it is, where people hire me to write music for them. And so it's the same thing, where what does this client want me to write them? And then I'll do something and then they don't want it. But the main difference is that there's generally not visuals to start out with. So I'm having to write the instrumental without any visual cues to do it. So it's freeing from the constraints of picture, but it has its own limitations for sure. And that's 90% of the time. Sometimes it's a lot simpler where somebody already has a song written and they want me just to write the instrumental, so to speak. But yeah, same thing. I mean, when you get hired to make music, you're no longer really an artist in the same way that a lot of people think musicians are artists. Yeah.
What about the lyrics? Do they provide the lyrics? Do they hire someone to write the lyrics? Is that brought in after the music is written? How does that work?
So it depends on the project and actually the type of artist. So when I'm doing reality TV stars, a lot of the time, because that's kind of what I'm most well known for, are people that are already in the public eye and essentially need a song as a marketing device, or they have musical aspirations, but they're not necessarily known for music. So the way those projects work is they hire me to write them a piece of music, an instrumental that is in the vein of something. So like, somebody on a TV show will go, I need a dance song. I love these dance songs. Can you make me an instrumental like that? And then I make it. And then sometimes they'll try to write the lyrics and what we call the top line, which is essentially the vocal melody and lyrics. And a lot of times they want to do that because it's going to come out of their mouth and they want to inject their personality in it. Other times, I'll work with a writing partner who's like a top line writer, who that's all they do is they just write catchy vocals. Sometimes I'll do it myself if they want a special type of Electro Point flavor. It really just depends on the project. But for the most part, the vocals come after the track is written because they're trying to make a track that is in the general vein of what's current on a specific genre's Billboard chart.
Cool. And what about you?
Yeah.
Are you making your own music?
I wish, Tom. I don't really have time. If I'm writing, no, I'm not. Is the short answer. I mean, what I did put out an album this year of film score type music. It was instrumental music, but what that really represents is, and like when I write stuff for you, I'm not sensitive when people say, I don't want to use this. Can you write me something else? Because like I said, it's a discovery. And what happens is I keep that music because I spent a lot of time writing it. They just don't want to use it. That's cool. So I'll go back to those scores sometimes and I'll lengthen them, or maybe I'll inject more of my own personality now that it won't be in a film. And that's about as close as I get most of the time to having the ability to work on my own music. And I released some of that music this last year, and I have one or two more of them coming out because it turns out people really like to listen to that type of music separate from the visuals. So yeah, I guess actually now that we talk about it, yes, I am putting out some music, but not in the way you'd think.
Is that a goal for you long term, is maybe to create more of your own music that you can distribute?
Maybe. I mean, honestly, my goals are to keep doing what I'm doing with film scoring because uh, this, I love the storytelling part of film. I love, what do I want to do at the end of the day? I mean, sometimes I want to listen to just music, but often I want to watch something that has great music in it because the human condition lends itself so nicely to multimedia, where when you see something and hear something, it hits you so deep and profoundly. So I want to be part of that process. And then, from another selfish standpoint, is when you write music for film or television, there is a far greater chance more people will hear it. So if I'm just writing my own music, and people might hear it, a few people, you might get some fans, or people who already like your film scores might listen. But if you write a piece for a show and that show does really well, far more people will hear the music that you're working on. So yeah, I'm not sure my long-term goal is to just do albums or anything. I do like doing that, but yeah, film and TV really get me far more excited.
That's great, man. It just seems like you're so focused and dedicated to your craft, and you know exactly what you want to do, and there's no flip-flopping. And I think that's why you're so successful, is because you've been so persistent and you've held steady with your goals, and you know exactly what you want, and you just create, grow, and progress.
Well, thanks, Tom. That's really kind of you to say.
And yeah, man, I really, again, I really appreciate this. Lastly, if there's any advice you can give to someone that's looking, maybe a younger person that's looking to get into scoring films, what's a good process for them at this point in the game?
Okay, so I mean, it's an interesting question because I do get asked that a lot, and I think it's twofold, uh, like all my answers. But it kind of depends on the stage you're at in your career. I mean, I strongly believe in music education, and I know that not everybody agrees with that. You know, some people don't have a classical training and they're very successful in film, and that's awesome. But in life, I just find that the more you know, the more you can choose to either follow it or not follow it. And so, music education is the first one, depending on the how far you are. And it's like anything. I mean, if you're a director, are you going to study other great pieces of like, you know, films that have great directing? Of course you are. Are you going to read books about directing? Yeah. I mean, it's just you should study your craft and get the basics down really good, because a lot of people want to skip that part. And I even do sometimes. I don't want to wake up and practice my scales, you know, like I just want to get into work. But the education and the training is very important from my viewpoint. So I put a disclaimer on that because I know not everybody agrees, but that would be my main advice, early stages. And then the second advice is to just like take yourself out of the project and put it into the relationship. So like, you know, working with you, for example, we're not like strangers. I'm not just like working on your television show or your short or your series and then not like, you know, being a friend or a person. So I think there's a big part of the human element that a lot of people miss, especially in like in the pandemic world. I mean, we're at home and we're not like, I can't go grab a drink with you and or go hiking or like hang out at the beach because we're isolated. um, so I think people need to remember to just like check in and treat the people you're working with as like friends and humans, because they all are people with feelings and goals, and it's not just a job, really.
Great, man. That's great advice.
Yeah,
Well, thanks so much. I do
sure.
appreciate this. All the best. I hope to be working with you very soon. I hope to see you soon. I know you're in California now. I hope to get out there and we could do some body surfing and hiking and biking and just hanging out,
Yeah,
man.
man.
Always,
Sure.
always great talking to you, brother.
You too, Tom, man. I really appreciate it.